Thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate everybody coming out, braving the weather. Thank you for coming out to Freeze for Freedom with Fritts. And I don't know how many of you have heard him speak before, but if you haven't, you're in for a treat. And if you have, you know, he says different things sometimes at different events, so it's not likely to be a repeat. My name's Dave Vance. I live in Stewart County. I am one of the regional coordinators for the Fritts campaign. Mary and Jonathan League are for Montgomery County. We had a sign-up sheet in the front. If you didn't get a chance to sign in, just please sign in before you leave. We've got yard signs, we've got push cards, we've got bumper stickers, we've got buttons. And so please take some with you, spread the word. We need you to tell 10 people who will tell 10 people, and so on and so forth, because, and, you know, I'm glad for the turnout we have here. Like I say, I appreciate everybody coming, but we're going to do more in Montgomery County. And so we really want to fill these places up and get the word out. I've known Monty for a couple years now, and I remember Richard Archie introduced me to him. And Richard Archie is the West Tennessee director of the TFA, and he says, "Dave, you got to meet this guy. He's like you." And he didn't say it, but I know he meant also smarter, but that's fine. But this guy is one of the few guys that you will see who does, or at least attempts to do, what he campaigns on. And that's rare in this day and age. And he does it as a servant, not to, well, let me see what's the next office that I can seek out. You know, what can I do to build my resume? You know, he does this for all the right reasons. And I'm proud to be part of the campaign. I'm glad to know him. I appreciate what him and Denise both do, and keep them both in your prayers. They're on the road a lot. 95 counties. Tennessee's a pretty big state. And I'm not sure when they sleep. I don't think they have much in the last 3 or 4 months. But anyway, you didn't come here to hear me, but I do appreciate everybody coming, and I'm going to turn it over to Monty. He will talk for a little while. A little while is kind of a relative term there. And then he'll take any questions you want to ask him, okay? Thanks again. Here's Monty.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Thank you. I won't need this, I don't think. And if I get a real bad frog in my throat and I can't communicate, I'll pick a microphone up. But I usually have lots of volume. I'm honored that you all would come out in the snow and the ice and the cold weather tonight to talk about liberty and less government. As Dave spoke, I do try not to say the same thing when I go to 2 different places. Some of it, we'll talk about budget a little bit and firearms laws and some of those things I usually hit at every opportunity. But after King Uzziah died, there's a point in Scripture where the prophet is standing, Isaiah is standing in front of God, and God says, "Who shall we send? Who shall I send, and who will go for us?" And Isaiah says, "Here am I, send me." So there's a few veterans in the room, right? So you've all said, "Here am I, send me." I think that's kind of the motto of the volunteer. And nothing in my being wants to be in politics. But I do want the little ones to grow up free and prosperous in Tennessee. And that's going to require a move toward liberty and less government. We're going to have to recalibrate the direction in which we travel. I do mention this from time to time. I learned how to land navigate when I joined the Army in 1983. And I learned with a compass, a map, and a protractor that to get to where I wanted to go, I needed to know where I was at the moment, and hopefully even where I'd been. And you have to first do your terrain association. To be that person that says, "Here am I, send me," you have to know where you are, and you have to do an accurate assessment of what your surroundings are. So we'll talk about that mostly for the few minutes I speak tonight, an assessment of where we are. But I'll go ahead and give you the bottom line up front. We need to set a new azimuth, and we need to set it toward liberty in Tennessee and less government. We are trending. You have lots of good men and women, blue state refugees that have moved into Tennessee. And they have come here looking for liberty and for freedom, and they have expected a deep red state, and I think we live in the best place in the whole wide world. I think God highly favors the soil between the Mississippi River and the Smoky Mountains. I do. But we have allowed things to get derelict in some respects. Since it's cold outside, I'll start with the energy part of it. While we have continued to deplete our ability to produce electricity, kilowatts, in all of America, but even in Tennessee, in this most blessed by God place where we have nuclear technology in my end of the state and we understand how to split atoms to boil water to turn turbines, where we have the Tennessee River and others that can provide hydroelectric power, and where we have had coal in the ground that we could use for a long time and gas in the Highland Rim. We find ourselves producing less electricity in the state of Tennessee than what we need. And so those in the federal government that have oversight for the Tennessee Valley Authority have not done anything. They've not exercised their oversight. And so we have found ourselves in a political policy perturbation that goes something like that. We're going to do better, we're not going to do well. We're going to do better, we're not going to do well. And that's costing us. It's costing us in quality of life. It's costing us in the rate, as you see the rate increases coming in now, because kilowatts are like F-250s. If there's a higher demand for them than what there are available on the Ford lot, you're going to pay more for that truck or that kilowatt. So while our federal folks have done nothing, and Tennessee had kind of grown accustomed to delegating or relegating all of our energy policy to bureaucrats in D.C. This is not the control room operators at Watts Bar Unit 1. It's not the folks that run the dam at Fort Loudon Dam or Watts Bar Dam. But the folks that make those policy decisions have gotten us in a fix. So my first year in the General Assembly, we decided that Tennessee needs an energy policy, and the overarching goal for that is to be a net exporter of kilowatts. We need to be there. We need a more bountiful supply of kilowatts. Now that's a big overarching goal. So the second year in the General Assembly, we restructured the State Energy Policy Council so that we would have experts who aren't charging anything, which is important. They want to contribute, that help us with nuclear energy, nuclear waste, gas extraction in the Highland Rim. And even if you go out to Memphis, where we have 1% of the nation's sweet crude refining capacity, we have a place on that committee to be able to provide that insight to governors and to general assemblies. That's important. To be energy leaders, we also have to be education leaders. And so we have also found ourselves as a state, I think, in policy perturbations about who's going to lead and direct the state of Tennessee in education. And we find ourselves going out and hiring people for prestigious jobs to be the Commissioner of Education in Tennessee, and we bring in people who don't share our values. And that's detrimental to Tennessee. We have found ourselves perhaps overusing standardized testing and depriving our good teachers in public schools from the ability to educate, to develop a curriculum, to deliver it, and then assess the students' performance against the learning objectives, because they spend so much time in standardized testing. We've done that, and we've let contracts to companies outside the state of Tennessee, and sometimes even outside this country, to deliver those standardized tests. That's problematic for me. We need to be seeking excellence in education in Tennessee. We need a less ballooned in size and more focused in excellence Department of Education. We've found ourselves buying into scams that becomes a soft form of socialism in providing vouchers. and violating Article 11, Section 12 of the Tennessee Constitution. We find ourselves doing that in many areas at the commissioner level in Nashville, Tennessee now, and that needs to be recalibrated. You know, we talk about elections. I'll go to another E. We talk about elections and that we're the first or second most secure in our elections in the entire United States. Okay, maybe that's true, but we have problems in our elections, friends. And that must be a high priority for the governor of the state of Tennessee. The mere fact that we don't talk about that in Nashville, that we continue to blow smoke and assume that we are infallible, is indicative of a lack of leadership in Nashville, Tennessee. We see in places like Little Somalia, formerly known as Minnesota, that we have allowed our nation to be colonized, and that we have allowed people to be elected that should not be elected, and we have seen a president, an illegitimate president, installed in these United States of America in a stolen election in 2020. We have seen federal bureaucrats that talk and federal office holders talk the talk about we're going to do this and that and the other. And then both our U.S. senators certify a fraudulent election. I'm still waiting on that apology. I don't know about you all, but I am. And until we get to that and that recognition, how can I trust them on any matter? Because those elections are foundational to our republic. And if we allow the cheating to continue nationally, and if we allow it to continue to creep in to our state of Tennessee, if we do not begin to seek a continuous improvement posture so that we don't have an election season, but we have an election day, so that we don't trust any electronics that are capable of being transmitted or manipulated, until we interrogate the identifications of the voters. Now, careful when you hear what I say there. I'm not talking about picking on Joe because he wants to vote. What I am talking about is making doggone sure and training to it that the identification that he presents matches the records. If that man wants to vote, he'll have his stuff straight when he comes to poll, and that is important, and we must do that. We are in trouble as a republic, and soft, weak males want to tell us that everything is okay. It is time that we assess our surroundings and determine where we are. Just as my initial example of talking about land navigation and shooting the azimuth to a new course, if we have a fraudulent or false or overly optimistic view of where we are today, we will never get to where we can be. I said in one of the places I spoke over the last couple of weeks up in Mountain City that I think Tennessee's better days may be lying in front of her. I believe that. But there's no easy button to get there. We have so many people in politics and so many people in the public that they want an easy button to be able to get us to liberty and less government. If you hear nothing from me tonight, hear this. We have a steep slope to climb. We have allowed corruption and overspending to overtake our liberties, and it must stop in the state of Tennessee. Economics, another E. I think, as a Republican, I'm supposed to be a small government, tight-fisted budget person. I think that I should be careful, brother, with your dollars. I think that I shouldn't spend them like a drunken sailor. Right now, we have folks in our federal government that set a poor example for that. They have us $39 trillion in debt and counting. Just this past week, we had congressmen and senators, this week, I guess with the senators, vote to make sure that we have refugee welfare to the tune of $5 billion. I think my country boy or my MBA math will tell me that that's a whole bunch of $1 million piles of money that we're sending to non-citizens. Meanwhile, we have veterans that can't get care. Joe and I were talking before we got started. I have a friend in Memphis. Has 3 Purple Hearts, wounded twice in one day. And it took him 7 years to get his benefits turned on. Our budget in the state of Tennessee, so all that's federal, I'm going to shift back to the state in what the governor is accountable for. 6 years ago, the budget request from Governor Haslam was $37.5 billion. I say this a lot, and if you're leadership in the Republican Party, you're going to get offended right now when I say this because it makes you nervous. It's true. There is no misinformation, as the speaker has put out on this. There is just facts in numbers. Now, we can debate whether we should or shouldn't send those dollars, but the facts are that budget request in 2019 was $37.5 billion and the 2025 budget request was $59.5 billion. If you do the math, that's a 59% increase in the state of Tennessee. We in Tennessee are a little bit better than the federal government. We require a balanced budget. It's balanced on both our state revenue and what we get from the federal government. But every dollar that we expend is a dollar that must be extracted from one of y'all's pockets or purses. We must stop the growth of the budget in the state of Tennessee. We must only spend dollars within the boundaries of the constitutional authority that the government has. When we build the Titans' new stadiums, we have committed a constitutional crime. When we build the Smokies in my end of the state, a $13.5 million stadium, we have committed a constitutional crime. But it gets worse, friends. Because if indeed you hold that we have been endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you hold that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, and if you hold that they derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, then when we decide to get outside the bounds of the Constitution as an elected office holder, whether it's a county commissioner, a state representative, or the governor of the state of Tennessee, we have not only committed a constitutional crime, but we have assumed a position of deity. Now follow me with this, because this offends people when I say it. But go back to what our founders said 250 years ago. We have been endowed by our Creator. That means our rights come from God. The Tennessee Republican Party guiding principles asserts 18 things. Go look at them. We're getting away from those guiding principles. One of those is our rights come from God. And so if you have a governor, a state rep, or a county commissioner that infringes upon your rights, they have assumed a position of deity. That don't work, and that's going to mess our economics up. In closing on the economics part of it, I would offer y'all this. You need to keep more money in your purse and your wallet. You know how to spend it better than bureaucrats and state reps in Nashville, Tennessee. And if you're from Montgomery County or you're from Roane County or Stewart County, more of that money needs to stay in the county, and we need to push that authority and that spending to the counties and stop taking so much at the state level. I intend to do that. A couple things that you'll see from me this year that are going to help. First, with the state level funding, I think we shouldn't be charging 4% state grocery sales tax on your purchases of light bread, sweet milk, and eggs, and a few other things. And I think that when we take that 4% from Granny, who lives 3 miles from here, on that light bread, sweet milk, or eggs, and we send it to the Titans or to the Ford Motor Company in West Tennessee in a form of corporate welfare, we have committed another egregious constitutional crime and a sin against the people. In Nehemiah chapter 4 and chapter 5, if you know the story of Nehemiah, he had gone back, he'd gotten permission from Artaxerxes to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. He gave him a note so that he could get timber to rebuild the walls, if y'all remember that story. And he trudges back. Well, by the time you get to chapter 4 and chapter 5, he's been attacked already by Sanballat and Tobias. Y'all remember that story? Yes. And they're threatening God's people as they try to rebuild the walls. And you remember there were two things, and that'll be my last point, Dave, when I get to this in a minute. Two things that they held. A trowel in one hand to lay those blocks in the wall, and a sword in the other. So let's save that topic for the sword for just a minute. So Nehemiah finds himself as he looks at his people, and they say to him, we don't even own our own vineyards anymore. We've had to sell our children off into slavery to pay the king's tax. Don't trust me, go look this story up. You know, remember back before that, when God's people said to him, we want a king like everybody else. Remember what God said to them through Samuel? He said, if that king will take your first fruits, he'll take your sons and send them off to war. But they had to be like everybody else. By this point in time, their fellow countrymen were exacting usury on those people. My friends, we're doing that to one another in Tennessee today. If you read what Nehemiah said, it said it made him very wroth, if you're a King James reader. If you're an NASB or something else, he said he got angry. We should practice a righteous indignation. We should be angry that we're sending so many of our dollars into government, into a big washing machine in Nashville, that every 100 pennies you send in, you will never get more than 99 back. Because there's the cost of running that washing machine. We must stop sending so much money into that washing machine. And my first attempt there at the state level is going to be this 4% state grocery tax. At a county level, and this gets me in trouble with county commissioners, brother. It'll get me in trouble in Shelby County, it'll get me in trouble in Montgomery County. It's going to get me in trouble in Roane County. Yes. I probably got one or two county commissioners and a county executive who are going to want to roll my yard next year if I get this through. They better not get caught. They're going to have to clean it up. But our property taxes, right now we're being taxed against unrealized capital gains. That is a constitutional no-no. We come in on every 4 to 5 year cycle and we reevaluate what your property's worth, Joe. And if you bought a house $350,000 10 years ago and it's worth $700,000 now, even if your taxes only gone up a small amount, you're still being taxed against an unrealized capital gains. We need to end that in Tennessee. I have a bill that will do that. That's going to make a lot of people nervous. I think if you think like our founders, the people are supposed to make the government nervous. Let me say that one more time. Somebody that's watching this later, I don't want them to miss that. The American system is supposed to be such that the American people hold the edge over the government. That's the whole idea of the Constitution. Every one of us that swore an oath to that Constitution to defend it, we are defending that right, that the bias of liberty always leans toward the individual. And we've allowed that to go away. So let's get our budget under control. Let's not DC our Tennessee. Let's not find ourselves in this crazy growth. There's a word I'm not going to use, but I'll ask you to go look at an old boy a book that I've read recently. He's from Roane County, lives in Anderson County now, and he uses some harsh language. So I won't use it since we have some children in the room. And my wife's going to be proud of me that I was cognizant not to do this. I'll get kudos later that I minded my mouth, is what she would tell me. But he uses some phrases. Mike Ferguson wrote a book, The Fears of Our Founders. And when he's talking about how we're spending money, he draws correlations to criminals, to those who are hurting children. And he applies it in a fiscal nature. That's happening in Tennessee. That hurts the feelings of the politicians when I say that, friends. But it's the truth. If they can't handle the truth, they need to pack up their bags and get out of politics. So that last thing, there's a trowel and a sword. And I'm going to close with this and take your questions. We have allowed ourselves to become a weak and timid-natured people in Tennessee. That is not my DNA. It is not the DNA of a Tennessean. Whether you are a native or a transplant, you assume some Tennessee DNA when you move in. We need a little more David Crockett and a little less Bill Lee in Tennessee. We need a little bit more Alvin York and a little less Al Gore in Tennessee. Because we've allowed ourselves to get in the position where we think like effeminate men. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of weak males. We've elected too many of them. And so they tell us, just trust us. You don't need to defend yourself. Let's just hire more police officers. Let's just hire more troopers. And you don't need to defend yourself. There's that thought process, I promise you, in Nashville, Tennessee. So much so that when this lawsuit that started in Gibson County, where a guy named Hughes and several other people were the plaintiffs in a lawsuit to sue Governor Lee, Jeff Long, who was then the Commissioner of Safety, and Attorney General Scarametti, that the intent to go armed and the right to carry in public parks to defend yourself, and the way the state was doing that with the intent to go armed language is unconstitutional. 3-judge panel ruled that it's unconstitutional. Rather than celebrate that we have removed Jim Crow law from Tennessee code books, or about to, and rather than celebrate that we're about to stop infringing on that part of our God-given right, who give us our rights again? Let me hear y'all say that. Make sure you're listening. God give us our rights. We're going to use your money to appeal that, and it's happening today. I think that's a constitutional apostasy. I think that those people that are part of it will never get the stench out of their clothes. Now, I know this sounds hard. Some of y'all have just met me. I'm not trying to be mean. If you ask my grandkids, I'm a nice guy. But these weak males that we've gotten in politics, they cannot think for themselves. And they cannot read simple words that say shall not be infringed. It's clear. Only an idiot cannot understand that. And so we've elected a few idiots and a few weak males. And it's time to replace them. I do think this is closing comments. I'm not picking on all these people I'm working with and saying I'm better than them. I'm not. I told you in the onset of this, I don't even want to be in politics. The only reason I ran for office to start with was because we were doing stupid things in COVID, and we were giving our money to the Titans, and I thought we could do better in Tennessee. I was happy I'd term limited myself to get out of this in 4 years. I was happy to go hunt more, hunt things I hadn't hunted yet now that I'm old enough and have enough money to go off to Alaska and places and hunt them. Ride motorcycles more, spend more time on my grandkids. And this will wig some of you out. Maybe somebody watches this later, but I'm just going to be honest. I prayed about this for months. God put a burden on me. There's an old church term that really comes back to that, take up your cross daily. A cross is not a special favor thing. To carry that beam on your shoulders that Christ carried to Golgotha is a burden. He carried the burden of my sin and your sin and had it himself nailed to that cross. When the Lord Jesus tells us to take up your cross, He is giving us a burden as Christians to be salt and light. Public service should be a burden. Doesn't mean that we can't enjoy things and meet nice people and make new friends. But it is a burden. I feel called to do this. I don't know that means that God's necessarily going to miracle my old self into this job. That's where it gets back to what Dave was saying. You got to get engaged. If liberty and less government, if charting a new course in the state of Tennessee toward liberty and less government, where you keep more money, where you know that the governor thinks he works for you rather than for the political elite, where you know that those people who have profane fundraisers and they think they can buy elections and they call people like me irrelevant, they're really saying you're irrelevant. You remember back when Hillary Clinton started this whole thing about the deplorables? You remember that? Well, you know there's a group in Van Buren County, Tennessee. Their Republican Party renamed itself, basically. And they refer to themselves, and they've got a T-shirt, the Van Buren County Deplorables. I got to tell you, it's a little bit of a badge of honor that someone on Senator Blackburn's campaign said I was an irrelevant candidate. Let's see what's irrelevant on the 6th of August after you people pray that we'll do what's right and holy in God's eyes, after you people pray that we'll remember our oath to my oath to the Constitution, and after you people pray that we'll keep a servant's heart. Because irrelevance is looking at things as a man. I think God is going to show grace and mercy on the state of Tennessee. I think He has a grand sense of humor in His infinite being. Because surely to goodness, if He would pick somebody like me to run to do this, He has a sense of humor. But let's lead Tennessee to liberty and less government. Let's make sure that little boys and girls grow up the way I did, that they could, with that liberty, put some elbow grease into the equation and exercise some prosperity. So again, thank y'all for braving the weather. Thank you for coming out tonight. I love y'all for coming out. And Dave's going to be the question moderator, I think, or you can just fire them or however you want to do them. It's like a business meeting.
Like a business
yes.
meeting. So we get you into office. Yay, we did it. Actually, God did it. What is your strategy then for dealing with the legislature, this supermajority legislature that realistically, as it stands now in the balance, could potentially end up being rather hostile to a lot of the things that you're going to do? How do you implement your liberty and less government agenda with a hostile legislature?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think that one of the first things that we're missing right now is leadership. And I'm not picking on Governor Lee, I'm not picking on the other folks. Human beings, all of us, you have to be a follower first to be a leader. You have to learn how to follow people before you can learn how to lead them, right? But I think some people never acquire that skill set of learning how to lead, to chart a course and to convince others. I think that one of the things that we are absent in doing in Nashville today, and one of the things that's hurting the confidence of the republic that we call Tennessee, this free and independent state. I think one of the things that's hurting us now is we have a group of bureaucrats and lobbyists and politicians that just say, Olivia, we're going to do this and you're going to like it. Mm-hmm. And I think people in Tennessee are fed up to their nose holes with that. I really do. I think how about we take the leadership role, and I think it's going to apply to some of those good men and women in the General Assembly. Not all of them are bad.
No,
right?
There are a few good ones.
Yeah, I think there's probably many, most probably got into this because they have a benevolent nature and they want to help people. Mm-hmm. And they got into a system and they were intimidated by some poor leader that they have to vote in alignment with what they're told, not what you, the people, say or what the Constitution says, but what the leadership says. And so I think just demonstrating some leadership and confronting those things, I think there will be people that will follow. Do I think that's going to be easy? No, there's no easy buttons. I've already said that. And I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people in Nashville want to kill me. That's okay. And I don't necessarily mean that literally. They'll want to egg my car or something. But that's okay too. Iron sharpens iron. Mm-hmm. And so let's use the bully pulpit of being the governor of the state of Tennessee to call these people out when they fight against your rights. Mm-hmm. And on that question, I didn't talk about this. This is something, it's one of the first things I think we've got to do. You know, we have legislative liaisons now. Some wonderful people, mm-hmm. really, really good people. But they have been tasked to influence whether bills pass or not, which is unconstitutional. I think it's counter to Article 2, Section 1 and 2 of the Tennessee Constitution. The governor only gets to put his or her say on the bill when it hits his or her desk. Right? Sign it into law, veto it, send a note back, or let it lay for 10 days, not counting Sunday. And all those legislative liaisons are going to be reassigned. Mm. I think that it's going to be important, tremendously important, for two groups of people. First, the citizen. I don't know if any of y'all are state employees. But first to the citizen who's not a state employee. It is tremendously important that you be able to call the governor of the state of Tennessee and someone, if they don't pick up and say, hey, Olivia, how are you? How's Montgomery County? That at least they call you back. Mm-hmm. Or if you email something, they email you back. Because who does the governor work for?
People.
Everybody say that loudly so everybody hears it in TV land.
Yeah, us, me.
That's exactly right. And so that becomes very important. And so Olivia should be able to write in or to call and say, for the governor's office, I think we're really doing well on these things. But I think maybe in DCS or roads or whatever, we need to fix this. This is a great problem for us. And I think on a monthly basis, that commissioner then gathers that information from that person who works for him or her. And they sit down with the governor and they say, Governor, according to the data we gathered this past month, the people regarding my area, if that's DOT, they think we're doing pretty well in these areas, but they think we're not doing so well. We got to do something about that. And I'm going to say, then what's your corrective action plan? I need that by the next time we meet, and let's put it on a 90-day schedule, and I want you to talk to each one of those people. I think that will be transformational in the state of Tennessee. I think that if the people think they can talk to the governor of the state of Tennessee, it will change lots of things. And it will also change that influence that I have over people who might want to say, well, you know what, we're just going to make Monty ineffective.
Yeah.
Well, that's all right. I'm going to go to the people in power, because Article 1 in the Tennessee Constitution says all power is inherent in the people.
Right.
And we have to demonstrate that. Here's the other thing I think we need to do. And this gets into the public, and you sit down. I'm not trying to make you stand up.
I'm getting a photo op with the governor. That's good for me.
Well,
probably more than it is for you. So.
I am verbose in my answers. But so I've managed workforces of lots of people. I had enriched uranium operations at Y12, had several hundred people, and we had ATLC or Knoxville Building Trades employees, mostly union workforce, but some non-union workforce. I'm a right-to-work person. I don't think you should be forced to join a union, and that's law in Tennessee. But I do think hearing from the people is important. And I think it is the fool who doesn't ask the people if I'm building houses, my carpenters and brick masons and concrete finishers ought to be able to come and talk to me and say, if we did this, Monty, this might work better. So that open door policy, so that the state employees feel heard, I can assure you they don't think they have that now. I understand, I heard this week, that there's a bill coming from one of the Middle Tennessee senators that would try to strip all the Tennessee Employees Association ability to have input. Yeah. I don't know how out of touch these people are. But I think that open door policy has to also apply to not just the state employee. I've traveled around the state a lot. I kind of like that. Denise and I kind of like doing that. When we're not in session, you couldn't really do this in session because you're on the timeline for those bills. But for the rest of the year, I think it'll be cool to go to Sumner County and set up shop for a couple hours there in somebody's office and just say, if you're in Sumner County, you got a problem with the governor, come see him. And Shelby County, and Lake County, and Roane County, and Hamilton County. And I think that'll be transformational in the state of Tennessee. Because right now, unless you're a big music person or you own a professional football team or you got at least, it's what they say to me about running for office. If you don't have at least this many $1 million, you can't do it. Mm-hmm. I think it'll change things. So, does that help? Does that answer your question?
You got my vote.
Thank you.
During 2020, no contract bids were used to purchase PPE at an increased rate. If governor, would you utilize no contract bids, and if so, for what purpose?
Yes, I can't imagine a circumstance that I would want to use a no bid contract. I think we've done too much of the contracting now. Think back to the education thing. I talked a little bit about the testing. Well, we're so knee deep in contracts on things, and much of the work that the state of Tennessee does should be contractually done. But to spend your money correctly, we should be bidding that. I heard this, and I got this secondhand. We'll talk about roads for a minute. And we have one road project, I'm told, that is a 40-year project right now, a contract. Yeah. So you know what that means? Did I make you laugh?
Yes.
Yeah, so what that means is that's not a project, brothers and sisters. That's a jobs program. Let's call it what it is. And so some of that stuff becomes that, I think. And the appearance of impropriety no contract bid, or no bid contracts, no bid contracts, does that kind of waft a little stink to you all sometimes? Yeah, it does me. And so we can't allow that. I think one of the things that we're struggling with the most right now, do I need to move? I've gotten out of the light. I was just scooted over where I wasn't being blinded, and I think we have a real confidence problem in the state, in the citizens. That your question indicates that there's a confidence issue there.
Yes.
Do you know what happens when the public loses confidence? All kinds of bad things. Well, all kinds of bad things. First, we might stop voting, right? And we might say, what's the use? And then what are we teaching our kids if we do that? So we got to stay engaged, and you got to have somebody that will force us to stay in that. No, I can't imagine. There may be an emergency that comes up that you let a contract because a tornado comes through or an ice storm or whatever. So there's probably those kinds of cases. I would hope that we're smart enough to have something already in place with the performance measures for those contracts to be ready for it. Because that's when your money is inefficiently spent. I got a call from a friend of mine. I won't drop a dime on him here on the video. But he said, Monty, this bridge is being built, and because it was poorly planned, it cost another $110,000 in contract. Now, in $60 billion, $110,000 is a small number, but it adds up, and it gets into that mismanagement of contracts. I know that sounds horrible. I'm not necessarily saying these people are crooks, but I'm saying they don't understand how to set performance measures. There's an old maxim that I think rings true. Tell me how you measure me, and I'll tell you what I am. If you don't have the right performance measures in place, your contracts will be ineffective. Long answer. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Leadership requires introspection, and I'm curious, at any point in your career, has there been a time where you've assessed data over a period and went, I made a mistake here? And because a lot of folks are pig-headed and just double, triple down
Yes.
on things. That's something that a true leader does.
Yes.
And I'm just curious if you've got any examples.
So I have some really bad news for y'all. He's asked a question that list is so long, I'm going to need to write another contract for this room to stay for another 3 or 4 hours first. Yeah, several things. I can go to votes that I think I messed up. And I'll start with one of those, right? One that we may not have talked about before. There was we get called into this silly red flag special session, right? And so I think mess with my gun rights, you're going to go to hell, just to be honest with you. I think it's a sin. And anyways, Jody Barrett, I think, is one of the people that voted to just sine die and never do anything. I was stupid enough to think that the system was going to allow me to offer some legislation that would be good for gun rights. Because I thought, hey, I'm going to use this as an opportunity. Bill Lee's trying to put red flag laws on us. I'll go in and try to deal with constitutional carry or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something that was favorable to the gun owner. Well, interpretation of the call is so slim that you can't get any of that through. And so if I had that to do over again, I'd have been another one of those people that just said, no, I'm not interested in even talking about this, rather than being naive, stupid, as I was, to think that I could make a difference in that. Several times, it is a long list. You asked this question, Josiah. I can remember several times, I'll tell you a war story, because we've some veterans in here. Are we okay with the war story, veterans? I am, if y'all are okay with it. And it ends well, it's funny. It makes fun of me. We had a really long day, because I'd re-enlisted in 2003. I got Denise's permission first. If you decide as an old man to go back in the service because we've done something stupid and going to go off to war again, then always get your wife's permission or your husband's permission. But it had just been a long week. We'd lost a soldier a few months back. It was hot. Iraq was hot in the summertime. I was old. I was a little whiny, and I wouldn't always sit in the TC seat in the Humvee. I could get a little quiet time sometimes by sitting in the gunner turret of the Humvee. We had 11-14s. And I from time to time would take my turn in the turret. And it had just been a long day. It's been a long day when You'd have to crank that 50 caliber round on something, right? Fire or not, it's a tense thing. And I'm just whining, Josiah, up in my own headset. I'm not talking to my crew. What was I thinking? My wife's at home. Both my sons are having surgery. Both of them have been hurt in football. This sucks being here. I don't want to be here. I'm too old for this. It's just been a hard day. And I was just whining like crazy. And God showed me that day. So we're coming through Balad, the Olive River you mentioned earlier. So you know where Balad is. Some of us do. I'm coming through Balad, coming to Anaconda. And there's a little place where you come through, and all of the little houses, they're like adobe-looking houses, and they got metal gates, remember? And one of those gates come fling open. So I start crank the gun around, right? And a little girl steps out. And she's about this tall. And olive skin, dark hair. But I notice as I get closer, and I realize it's not a threat, right? But I realize as I get closer that one of her eyes has like a cataract or something on it. Like one eye was really dark and one eye was just as white as your shirt. And as we get up, and I'm sure some of y'all experience this, right, that have been overseas maybe, and this little girl blows a kiss. And so I come to the realization of two things. One is, don't whine, right? Suck it up, buttercup. Stay in the fight. And God calls us to do hard things as men. And don't have those moments of weakness. It's the Rocky Balboa thing. It's not how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And then, that God in His infinite, that His poor, whiny, least of sons would use a little girl about that tall to blow a kiss and encourage me. I will never forget that in all my life. And so, that one is I don't whine. We could talk about car purchases, and that's a whole long list, but I better stop with that. Yes. Does that answer your question?
So going back to, you were talking about education and liberty.
Yeah.
And less government.
Yeah.
So there's a big push right now going through the legislature, and I want to know because our current governor was hell-bent on getting this voucher program through, and now we're pouring money into it, and we have no idea what's going on with it. And we saw that the outcome is, in Tennessee, is, I think we're passed by Mississippi and Louisiana now, which doesn't say much for the education system.
Leadership matters.
So,
yes.
Exactly. So what we're seeing is a push by a lot of the public school people and the public commissioner and et cetera to rein back homeschooling.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the exact opposite of what we should be doing when the exodus is out of public school and even out of private schools. What's your take on that as governor, and would you look to reverse course on things that have been going on here? Because clearly people are more concerned about making sure their state money is flowing to them versus making sure our children are getting properly educated.
Yeah, the establishment people have a different view on education than I do. First and foremost, the vouchers are unconstitutional in my opinion. So if y'all hire me, we'll stop them. I'm going to stop them. That probably means that they're stopped for the fall of 27, the way the money goes out, right? But they're stopped. I have not read both of those bills that you're referring to. There's two that have come out.
Right.
And first, if a bill come across my desk as governor that was interfering with a parent's right to homeschool uninterfered with by the government, I'd veto it. And I don't think, I know a couple folks, I think Slater's one of the ones that wrote one of those bills, and is it Adam Lowe, bless his heart. He just can't keep out of trouble. But, you know, he brought me a bill last year that the first two sentences were something along the lines of, and the homeschool parents shall submit their curriculum to the LEA. And I just hand it back to them, right? And I'm like, what are you thinking? Yes. Well, first, God gives the child to the parent, period. not the state of Tennessee, not the county of Cumberland or Roane or any other, gives them to the parent.
Correct.
The parent gets to decide. If we indeed are free, you know, we called this voucher farce a freedom scholarship, right? I was already free. I didn't need Bill Lee to try to make me free. And the parents in my district were already free. Freedom is not incentivizing. I talked about F-250 a minute ago.
Yes, you did.
I drive an XLT. It's sitting out there. We drove it up because it was a little snowy. I would like to have a Lariat with one of them that massages you as you drive. I'd pray never stay awake, but you know, Ford has that option, right? And I couldn't get my wife to go that far. I told her I needed a new truck, but the whole massage option was out. Should you have to incentivize me to buy the massage seats on my truck? Absolutely not. No. That's the soft socialism I was referring to, and that's what we're doing with this. So I had a dear lady, I won't mention her name, send me an email and say, you know, I like everything you're saying, but on the school vouchers, I have 3 kids, and all 3 of my kids are getting the vouchers and they're going to Christian schools. And I'm all for kids going to Christian schools. She's mama, but that's $21,900 y'all's tax money that this person's getting. And so it closed kind of with, I'm going to pray that you'll change your mind. I'm not going to change my mind. That's soft socialism. We have to stop that. But it is equally socialism, whether it's Slater or what's the little fellow from Bradley County that's on one of them too? Is he on one of those bills?
I think so.
Yeah. That's also socialism. When we start reaching into the homeschooling and whether it's truancy or whether it's testing.
Right.
Get out of the homeschools, period. Leave them alone. As a matter of fact, we're having a hard time succeeding in our public education, right? We say we're failing. We say we're failing. We offered that. We even changed their letter scores so that we could get the voucher thing in. Well, why would we want to make homeschool look more like that?
Right.
And you know the answer, and I know the answer. Right. It's called $7,300 per kid going to that school.
That's exactly.
And we cannot do that. We must not do that. Absolutely must not do that.
You're thinking properly.
Yes, I think so
Thanks,
too.
sir.
I think so too. There's probably lots more on the whole education thing too in that topic. I say this from time to time, and I talked to a group yesterday to finish an answer to that question. I think our structure, K through college in Tennessee, is pretty doggone strong. I think the opportunity to either go, for a public school kid, to go from kindergarten to either a trade school at one of our campuses or a community college or then even on to a university is pretty strong in Tennessee. And it's affordable, right? It's affordable for the student to be able to get an education whether they choose to be auto mechanics or they choose auto mechanics and then go get a business degree because they want to do that. And those are all good things. I think the passion amongst most of our teachers is pretty good. I think that one of the unintended consequences of what the underhanded way that we took on these school vouchers is that we've increased the passion in the good teachers, right? And I think most of them are good. Some people argue with me there. Now, I will tell you, the smut that we've got in our libraries and in our books, whether it is in the public library or the school library, unacceptable. Zero tolerance for that. We can read and study the classics, and we can accomplish an education curriculum without exposing children to LGBTQ issues. We must do that in Tennessee. We must stop that, and we must just educate the children. But I think that the structure's in place. I think there's lots of energy, and I do think some of that has come from we probably didn't. We had commissioners of education and maybe even some people in the school boards that felt like they were above listening to the educators or the parents. And it ought to be in that inverse order. And when we do things in education, parents, educators, and then the rest of the economy that it supports, right? Because that's the whole idea of a school is it's a factory that outputs product. And the So I can talk that one to death. I'll touch one more thing on that because it's so important. Education is so important. You often hear we're not spending enough on education in Tennessee and that we're 46th or 47th. Should we be 46th or 47th? No. But should we be more efficient and effective in what we're doing? The answer is absolutely yes. If you say to the cattle farmer, you are, and I use this and it offended a lady up in Northeast Tennessee, and it wasn't meant to make the comparison between kids and cows. But if you told a cattle farmer that he was producing good beef and his was the 46th lowest cost, he would take that, or she would take that as a compliment, right? That they were efficient and effective in raising that cattle, that product, and putting it out the door. Same thing if you're making tires. Education's got to be some of that, right? There has to be an efficiency in it.
Right.
And it's not just about throwing money at things. And the product is the child. The factory is the school. The factory workers, not to make it too insulated or utilitarian, are the educators and the staff that run those schools. And the customer is first the parent and second the community, right? I mean, I just really think in my simple way of looking at supply chains that is it. And sometimes we lose sight of that. Sometimes, just like we made that 40-year TDOT project a jobs program rather than a project to improve a road, we must not allow ourselves to think that way. We must not. And so, I know I've talked that to death, but hopefully that's helpful.
That was good.
Act like I just met him.
Yeah, in that shirt, that ain't gonna go well. Yeah.
So one of the things our state does is give away money to NGOs.
Yeah.
So like 3 or 4 years ago, they gave $7.2 million to Catholic Charities.
Yep.
And Catholic Charities, just think of them as the refugee importer for Tennessee.
Yep.
And I'm sure that's not the only money that they've wasted on NGOs. So what can we expect as far as funding for NGOs when you're governor?
Yeah, I think we're at a point, Dave, and not just because of what we saw happen in Minnesota, but just what we've seen happen in our state, right? Or Texas, or other places. Again, you don't have to go to Minnesota and Twinkie Tim waltz to see how badly things can be managed. Some of these red states do the same thing. I think NGOs become vehicles to counter around constitutional authorities, and I think we must stop them. Now, there's going to be some pain with that, and somebody will egg my house or scratch my car for that part of it too, because I'm sure there's some NGO that is getting funding that's doing something that most everybody or all of this room would say, hey, we need to do this. But I think we got to hit the reset switch. Our budget is we're going off Niagara Falls with a budget. And stop that. And evaluate then where it is. No money to Muslim schools. We shouldn't be training jihadis.
Absolutely.
No. Should not be doing that. And, we have this conversation with different people from time to time, and this stings some people. They'll say, Monty, when I say this comment, so brace for impact, especially if you hadn't met me, you're going to say, Monty doesn't believe in religious freedom. And, well, God doesn't. He says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Our founders, that's his word, not mine, that's his. And our founders in Article 1, Section 3 of the Tennessee Constitution say that all men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God, capital A, capital G, within the dictates of their own conscience. And we've allowed ourselves not to become weak when it comes to guns, and unwilling to say no, and unwilling to call abortion murder, and unwilling to call redefinitions of marriage sin. All those things, right? We're sugarcoat things.
Yep.
And those are weak approaches. The most compassionate thing that you can do to me, if you see me about to step off of a cliff into eternity and spend that time in hell, is to grab me and say, before you take that next step, let me warn you about what you're about to do. And I think that's one of the roles of civil government. God established the family, the civil government, and the church. And I think what's role of family, certainly, but I think one of the roles of government is to put those boundaries in place.
Right.
So that it is clear what is right and what is wrong. And constitutionally, it is wrong for us to send money to an NGO that while they may not show a profit bottom line,
Right.
there are going to be people, even if all their staff, and that's usually not the case, but even if all their staff made zero income,
Yeah.
in some cases, in many cases we've seen lately, their objective is deleterious to the republic. And we can't let that happen. And if it becomes a form of soft socialism, we can't let that happen. And that's going to sting people so much. Again, it goes back to that easy button thing. I think we're this deep in Tennessee. I don't even know what I think about Michigan and California. I really don't.
Foreign countries.
Yeah, I don't know how deep they are in the hole. But here in the greenest land and the land of the free, we've got a steep climb to get out of the hole we've put ourselves in. It's the whole reason we did this prayer resolution thing a couple years ago. After I'd sat with Governor Lee and just so frustrated, he was pushing for red flag law. And I go back to my office and I'm writing, I keep a yellow pad usually, sometimes a white pad, but usually yellow because I can see it better with my old eyes. And I'm writing down all my grievances about what's happening. You know, we have 9,000 children who don't have mamas and daddies, and we've got drug addiction and people killing one another in the streets and homes, and husbands are beating on wives and wives are beating on husbands. And I'm like, we can't legislate our way out of that. We can't spend enough money to fix that. We need a miracle. And, you know, there was a Navy term. I worked with a bunch of those new Navy people, and hope is not a course of action.
Right.
And I get that. But I do think our only hope is that a revival in our state where God's people will start to call things what they are. It doesn't mean that we're mean. It doesn't mean to that man or those men that have made a horrible decision and tried to defile the institution of marriage. It doesn't mean that we hit them in our head with our King James Bible. It does not mean that. But it means very clearly that we have to say, this is what God said. And the Constitution doesn't give us an authority to go past the authority of God's Word. And we ought to say, we love you. I'm not trying to make any of y'all uncomfortable with this. But we have to tell them the truth. We have to say to that not only the young woman, and I'm getting smoked by the Justin Canoe, right, and it's okay, it's okay. I love him. He's just wrong about everything. And I appreciate him taking time to ask questions, right? But they'll cut things the way they want them, and everybody's going to turn this whole thing where I'm talking about either transgender surgeries and abortions that Monty just wants to execute women. That's a lie. You're being deceived and diffused by that. The fact of the matter is, if we don't start calling abortion murder, we're going to continue to kill babies. And so I told Justin, I don't know if it made that interview, I hadn't watched it yet, but I'll say it on this one. That doctor that's sending pills in from that library in California, right? Yeah. I would look forward to the day to try them for life in prison or capital punishment in the state of Tennessee for the babies they've murdered and the mamas and the daddies that they've hurt. And if that doctor happens to be working first, Tennessee Department of Health, we won't be issuing condoms, any kind of contraception on your tax dollars if I'm your governor. I think I can stop that with an executive order. Yeah. And I will openly rebuke the folks that are giving out abortifacients on tax dollars to young women and to young men. I think we have to draw those lines in the sand. And that's going to be harsh, and that puts me at great danger. That's why y'all need to be praying for your little fat buddy from East Tennessee. The blue hairs are going to want to kill me about this. And then all those closet blue hairs that call themselves Republicans, they're going to be wanting to kill me. You know I'm speaking the truth.
Yep. That'd be McNally's Minions.
Well, could be. Could be. So I'm getting all wound up about that. I think that we've gone too far by not calling things what they are. And it's something I talk about in every group, or most every group. And I would ask you to do the same thing. Hold me accountable to the Word of God and to the Constitution. So an atheist tried that, right? Yeah, and so I'm okay with that too, right? Because God's Word's true whether if Lucifer speaks it correctly or if you speak it. God's Word's never going to change, right? So after we did our prayer resolution, I get a letter from the Citizens Against Everything or whomever they are. And they're And they're saying, well, you can't talk about God in public as an elected office holder. I said, well, my founders did. It's in my Constitution. Well, you really can't say Jesus, because that's the word they really don't want to hear. It's the name above all names that brings them great trouble. So then he's quoting Scripture to me, that why I can't do this, right? I got the letter. I used to keep it in my Bible. I took it out of my Bible. It's laying on my reading table downstairs in the man cave right now. But there's two cases in Scripture where Satan tries to use God's word to confuse someone. The first one's in the garden with Eve, and he does that, and that's because Adam had become a weak male. Wasn't Eve's fault, men. She may have eaten the apple or the persimmon first, but it was the weak male standing in the back who knew the command of God, who did not properly instruct, that got us there. And the second time was the temptation of Christ. If somebody uses the Scripture against you that you can't tell people about God, it might be from, what was it the church lady on Saturday Night Live used to say? Satan?
Can I have a follow-up?
Yes.
Because you kind of touched on it.
Yes.
So,
Hold on, let me get some more water.
all right.
I'm talking myself dry.
You know, in Texas, they've got this problem with the Epic community down there, and of course, they've got a lot of others.
But they've renamed it, so it's okay now.
Oh, okay. I was worried about that. Yeah. Anyway, I know that you know a little bit about the situation here in Tennessee.
Yes.
So, how do we deal with that? How do we make people understand the Islamic threat, and what can we do as a state to deal with the Islamic threat in our country?
So I think there's
Or in our state.
I think there's two or three things, and I'm going to start with the only long-term answer, and that is for us Christians to be a witness to those people who are lost and going to hell. Because if someone has adopted Islam as their religion, they are lost and going to hell. But they're also lost and going to hell if they're sitting in a Baptist church and they haven't confessed Jesus as Lord and believe in their heart that God raised him from the dead. So the first is that we have to be a light to those people. Secondly, we have to talk about the dangers of what their culture is going to bring to us. Many veterans, I don't think most of the folks that are in politics get this, but it's a greatly offensive thing to hear that we have a Muslim community defrauding citizens of tax dollars and telling Americans that they can't speak up in places like Michigan, Texas, and I'm sure they want to try to do that here where they get the numbers sufficient. And many of us who have served, and those were often the people that sent us back home without arms and legs. And I don't think the average politician understands just how offensive that is to me.
Right.
And so speaking of it, I think is part of it. I think getting to the NGO part of it, Dave, is part of that. Don't send money. I'm sure somebody will want to sue, but first we're going to end the whole voucher thing. But Tennessee tax dollars cannot be funding Muslim schools, Chinese schools. They can't.
I agree.
We can't. We got to stop that.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So one of your E's was elections. And what was your wording about Tennessee's is the standard? What was your wording on that?
Don't know. I've talked so much I can't remember what I said. I'll just.
He says we're the most secure in the nation.
Well, so that's
We're supposed to have
that's
this highest standard and we're most secure in the nation?
well, that's what some people have said.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so Colorado slogan is we have the gold standard of elections. They use Dominion. And Dominion is compromised by everyone who can get their hands in it. Almost every single election in Colorado is won 60-ish to 40-ish, which is statistically impossible.
Wow.
And we saw that in the Trump election.
Yep.
The fake election. My question is, would you support paper ballots
Yeah, I would.
statewide when other countries are now changing over to paper ballots? Would you support Tennessee as a whole, as a state, to have paper ballots in our elections?
I would, but I wouldn't follow any other country. That's the problem now. We've done too much of that. I wouldn't want to follow any other state, to be honest with you, because we've done too much of that. And I think cheaters are going to cheat. And so whether we use electronic counters and we count and then electronic counters, either way, you got to guard against the cheating. Because the whole Battle of Athens is an example right here in Tennessee that cheaters are going to cheat. And even if we use currency grade paper ballots and we count them, there will be some crooked, corrupt, evil person that will try to steal the election. And we've got to hold them to a hard consequence. Now, maybe that doesn't mean breaking into the armory and going and blowing the jail up, right? But, you know, that's what happened in Athens, Tennessee, right? And I think that we've lulled ourselves. The reason I mentioned that we're number one or number two is we've lulled ourselves into a sense of complacency. Oh, it'll never happen here. It's all perfect. Nothing wrong's going to happen here. Well, I don't buy that.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming.
already happening.
We're Colorado refugees. We came here. We thought this was a red state. We thought it was a conservative state. We thought it was a Republican state. Well, I mean, conservative.
Colorado used to be.
And it wasn't. We moved to Colorado when it was red. And it has turned to California. We call it Eastern California.
Yep.
And the Californians were warning the Coloradans to saying, it's coming. You
Yep.
have got to stop it.
Yep.
And they didn't.
Yep.
And we Coloradans now are saying, it's coming,
Yep.
Tennessee. We've got to stop it.
Yep. Yep. I agree with you. And I think that a couple things that we face there's a complacency on behalf of the native, right?
Yes.
And sometimes there's an arrogance on the part of the person that's moving in, right? And we allow that to become a head bump rather than let's figure out we're all Tennesseans. Who was it that said this? We were in Marion County, I guess, and I hadn't heard it put any better that, hey, folks are moving here. They become a Tennessean when they move in. We've got to sit down and have these iron sharpen irons conversation. And you're not necessarily saying I'm a barefoot idiot because I don't see what's happening. But I might be a barefoot idiot if we don't change something. Because those people that want to steal the elections don't care if I wear shoes.
Right.
They don't care if I have any economic prosperity. And they certainly don't want me to have any liberty. And I think this is part of the other thing that we miss with this. You know, I get called conspiracy theorist a lot because of some of the things I speak up for, right? There is a movement. Let me say this to the camera. There is a movement in this world and in the United States to bring us down.
Yes.
And if you do not recognize that there is an ongoing assault on our republic, you're not awake. And that includes us natives, and it includes the refugees. And we better figure out how to work together to solve that. Yeah, and so I'm all for the paper ballots. I have people occasionally say, well, we'll just have somebody count it. Well, you got to have somebody watch the counter too. We've got lots to do on that to get that correct.
Well, it's amazing we've done it for decades, 100 of years, and they are saying we can't do it. It's too big. There's too many people. And it's amazing how we've done that before until the tide was turned, till we turned to electronic voting.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes who made those campaign donations to get that.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Your opinion on people who come from other countries coming here and getting into our elected offices, and you know, it's turning everything around from what it should be. I mean, they're putting their morals and values in from their countries in onto us now, and then Minnesota, we've all been talking about, is one of the prime examples of that, misuse of our money and things of that nature. How are we going to be able to control that and stop that?
I think we need to do a couple things on that, and this will offend some of us older people when I say it. I think, maybe not you, brother, but it'll offend some of us older people. But I got to tell you, the young people love this message, and I heard some of it from them, and it surprised me. We need to stop all immigration into the United States immediately.
100%.
We need to start removing the H-1B visas and sending those people out.
100%.
We need to deport every single illegal alien that come into these United States. They go out and come back in at some point in time after we lift it. We've hit a super saturation point where our culture is in a state of demise. If we do not correct that, we're not going to have a republic. We've got to stop that. And these You know, we colonized Michigan. The reason there's an Ilhan Omar is not just Democrats. It's not just the stupid Democrats that had an open border for Joe Biden. It was Republicans that did that too. As a matter of fact, somebody just sent me an article today that our current governor and one of our senators were all for bringing that money in for NGOs to have more refugees come in the state of Tennessee. It is killing us politically. Let me tell you how else it's killing us. You shouldn't be paying to educate a foreign citizen in our schools in the state of Tennessee. I got into a little bit of a disagreement with Lieutenant Governor on that. We were in Loudoun County the other day, and it was a Farm Bureau thing I did there. And I had a choice of going to like a Chamber of Commerce or a Farm Bureau thing. I definitely chose the Farm Bureau thing. And question come up about education and vouchers and all that kind of stuff. And I make the statement, well, we had a bill last year that would have fixed that. It would. You either bring documentation with you or you pay the TISA amount before that child starts school. There would have been to quote, what was the guy that ran when Clinton ran, and Ross Perot. Well, you remember he said there would be a massive sucking noise when we did NAFTA? If we had passed my bill, there would have been a massive sucking noise of illegals leaving the state of Tennessee because their kids wouldn't have been able to go to school. That was my objective. I know that sounds hard to some people that hear that. We got to stop paying for them. Then, in that same school, even if we had ubiquitous money to pay for everything, little boys and little girls will sit in classrooms where 20% or 30% of the children are English as a second language.
Yes.
And they lose the opportunity to learn. And so we will have state senators here in the state of Tennessee, when we talk about coming down on that, they cry on camera.
Yes.
And so first thing is, stop electing the weak males that are U.S. citizens and pick up a ballot and run. That's the second part. That should be the thing for everybody in this room. If I'm willing to charge this hill, I'm going to charge it, then every one of you all ought to be charging hill in politics somewhere. You ought to. You ought to be running for county commission, school board, something, because your voice matters. It does, young lady. You were in the Marine Corps what years, may I ask? Thank you. Thank you for joining at a time of extended war. What did you do in the Marine Corps? In the band. That's awesome. That's awesome. Your voice matters. And let me tell you what these people that say that we're irrelevant, and they say that it takes millions of dollars, and they want to contribute to the delinquency of politicians by forcing them to pay $1,500 to speak for 3 minutes or $15,000 to speak for a time. They want to take you, young lady, out of the equation. They want to take you all out of the equation and pick who they want to be in charge of things. And so, back to your question, how do we fix that? We need to get some of the money out of the politics, because most of us that aren't in that racket, we don't want this to happen. And those that are in the racket are making money on it.
Yes. And, and I've got friends that's come over here, and they waited a long time. They did everything the right way to get in here, and some of them turned in to be good business owners, and I happen to work for 3 of them now. But they are all, nobody listens to their opinion either, and they're like us, hey, we had to wait to do the right thing, and they just opened up the gate and let everybody flood in here and just start throwing money at them and everything else. And, it's gotten way out of hand.
It is way out of hand.
Part.
I agree with you.
And military, I deal a lot with the military here, and I'm going to go a little bit of a different way off of my question I was asking as far as vaccines and things of this nature. There's a lot of young military men and women right now, 18, 19, 20 years old, having to get out from these COVID vaccines that they've taken.
Yeah.
Myocarditis and things like that happening.
Yep.
That, the rest of their lives, he's 19 years old, and I'm not going to say his name, but he's going to be covered for the rest of his life because he's got myocarditis. There's a lot of things in life he's not going to be able to do because of these things. And they were forced on these young men and women. They had, it's...
So we did a resolution a couple of years ago, and it upset some people, a resolution, and it was one of these strongly urging Congress, right? Because obviously we can't make Congress do it. I've decided to stop quoting the Constitution to my congressman and quote Scripture to him and say, "Thus saith the Lord," because he carries a big sword. Yes. They don't think they have to follow the Constitution. But we passed a resolution saying that strongly urging Congress that the VA would provide care for those harmed by these illegal COVID-19 and anthrax vaccinations. And then we encourage Congress to investigate the command structure that resulted in that. I sent a copy of that to everyone in the Tennessee contingent, even the Democrat. I sent it to every one of them and both of our senators. And guess what's happened?
Nothing.
Yeah, but they'll all tell you they love their veterans.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But there's too many of them out here that's doing without sleeping on the streets and all, and I could go on and on about these things. And it's really ridiculous, and they don't listen to us enough, and they don't value our opinion well enough because not enough of us speak up and stand up together like you're talking about rushing up the hill.
Yep. So let me tell you this. We were talking about this earlier, the 59% budget growth over that same 6-year period of time. If you look at Tennessee state veteran spending, it's gone down.
Yes.
And last year, General Baker, who's I think does a good job with the Tennessee Department of Veteran Services, requested 4 VSOs for the state to visit hospitals, nursing homes, and jails. Those are high incidence of veteran suicide locations for veterans, right? He asked for 4. The governor cut him back to 2. They have, by my estimation, not F&A, but by my estimation, it's about an $80,000 to $85,000 fully burdened cost to have a veteran service officer. So for $160,000 or $170,000, we had to spend on a ball stadium or something. We couldn't hire those VSOs.
Yes.
And so when we do an amendment to add those 2 back in, I can't get enough Republicans to help me pass it. We're hurting on leadership, brother.
We really are.
Yes, sir.
It's gotten a shame, and I could go on with a lot of other things too that's going on. Is DAs and things like this. They get in there and get power hungry and man hungry.
8 years.
And they enforce things on police officers, chiefs of police and stuff, and make up things and get them out of office just because they're not going with their agenda of things, how they want to run things.
Yeah.
And we got to hold them accountable some kind of way, or some kind of way to reel these people in and make them understand, look, you're going after these people who's wanting to force the constitutions and things of this nature, and you're cutting their legs out from under them, or finding a way to take their jobs from them and making them look bad. And I mean, it's just gotten real bad in the past 20 years.
It has. I agree with you.
And our babies that are being born, for they're 7, 8 months years old, they've got 72 vaccines already they've taken.
Yep.
And it's just, it's terrible. It really is. And they're not thinking about the things that's happening to these children before they're 5 years old.
This goes back to that thing I mentioned, Article 1, or Tennessee Republican Party Guiding Principles. I think it's the first point about our rights come from God. We're missing that because we in government, in departments of health and governor's offices and et cetera, think that we can mandate your child to take vaccinations. We need to be going the other direction. You'll see from me this year an attempt to end mRNA and self-amplifying mRNA for both humans and animals in Tennessee, because I think we need to get rid of that.
There's a lot of Amish that don't have that problem in their families.
Yep.
They don't have these children with ADHD and all these other things going on. We have lost our right to choose what our families can take or what's given to our children.
Well, what we've allowed, brother, is we have lost it, but we've lost it of our own volition because we won't stand up and say, no, you're not doing it. The first step in nullifying some of that stupid stuff is to just say no.
Governor Fritts, you've said, I'm just going to call you governor, we're speaking it in. So we're praying it in, we're speaking it in. You've used the word easy quite a bit tonight. Mm-hmm. And you're 100% correct, it's not easy, but it is simple.
I agree with you.
We've got a book, we've got a constitution,
yes.
We've got founders. So don't let anybody try to talk you out of that.
Most things in life are simple, they're just not easy.
They're not easy,
that's right.
That's right. Willing to charge the hill, like you said. So my question is, circling back, so $59 billion budget, we need to cut that back. We're talking about dialing back, hopefully, sales taxes, property taxes, et cetera. So Governor Fritts.
And the property taxes aren't going into that $59 billion, right? They're local.
Right.
But
local.
The sales
they're
tax
local,
does, yes,
but
sir.
The sales taxes. Yeah. So as the governor, your budget priorities, what would be your top 3 priorities contemplating scaling that 59 billion back significantly, which you've mentioned.
So I
you
think two of them
intend
are
to do,
the-
But what would your top three priorities be?
Two of them have to remain what two of the spending priorities are now, and that's education
Okay.
and health, because those are the two big expenditures in the current budget. And I think those still stay there. I think that you would create such a perturbation of the system if you tried to interrupt that quickly that you'd break things. Third has to be infrastructure.
Okay.
And not just roads. I think if we'd put a few more dollars in infrastructure and a few less dollars in ball fields and forward plants, we might weather storms a little better than what we are now. But I think that's got to go into the sit down at the energy table and not accept just a TVA thou shalt.
Right.
Right? Well, I mean, they tried that in Cheatham County. Somebody here's from Cheatham County. Who's from Cheatham County? Somebody was from Cheatham County. One of these young ladies here, I think. TVA tried that again. They were going to do another land grab in Cheatham County, Tennessee. And we've got thousands and thousands of acres. Lots of great TVA people. But at an upper level, they think they don't work for us. Last I checked, that soil where every one of those places sit is in Tennessee. And I think we need to start asserting that some. And I think that we need to get on electrical infrastructure. I think that we need to open the market economy on kilowatts, just like it is on tomatoes, chickens to some extent, depending on where you are, Ford trucks or whatever. Because right now, we and this is not a get rid of TVA, don't anybody hear that. I'm not necessarily suggesting that, but I am saying that if you want to put in solar, 28% effective, West Tennessee, we're covering farmland with solar panels because there's a federal incentive to do that. That's stupid, right? But it might be smart in peak times in the summer that if Samantha and Josiah say, I want to invest X number of dollars to cover my barn with solar panels, if I can sell those kilowatts back at an equitable rate, no price fixing, I'll never be a part of that, but this fractions of pennies that you can get now, there's no incentive for them to go do that.
Right.
And so 2 times of the year, we need more kilowatts when it's really cold and when it's really hot. And so part of the way we solve that, I think, in the hot part of the year is open that economy up. In the cold part of the year, some of these geothermal methods to be able to produce electricity and nitrogen and all that stuff I'm learning about that we can recycle because of the heat exchange, maybe we can do that in the wintertime as well. Because we aren't going to be able, TVA is not going to be able to populate small modular reactors all across the state of Tennessee in 7 years. Yep. Some people think that. 2 long poles. Got to have higher assay fuel to be able to be optimally efficient with that, I think. That's 10 years out. And authorization basis. And this it goes back to the locals, the natives, and the folks who've moved in, the refugees. I hear a lot of this in Jonesboro. So Jonesboro has airjet ordinance up in Washington County. And so all of the certain types of rounds that are made for the military are made in Tennessee, right? Everything good ought to be made in Tennessee. And so they've been processing uranium for 4 or 5 decades. And bless her heart, this little lady comes in Jonesboro town hall thing we were doing, and she says, we're not going to tolerate having uranium in the county. I said, how long you been here? She said, 2 years. I said, well, you better talk to some of those people who've been working there for 30 years before you decide you're just going to shut that place down. But the reason I offer that is in my area, Oak Ridge is part of my district. So everybody says we glow and all that. That's not the case. Uranium doesn't glow. Tritium does. Right. And as accepting as we are to uranium technologies in Oak Ridge and in Roane County and Anderson County, Tennessee, when we start moving something that's 1/3 of the size of this room and planting it in a subdivision to produce electricity, there's going to be a massive, not in my neighborhood. Write it down. It's coming. And so that's something I'm not sure that everybody's ready for. I'm not sure that they're ready for that. And not just the authorization basis part of it, but the public resistance. And If nobody from Colorado had ever moved here, we would still have that. So don't think I'm picking on the refugees. If all of us were native in Tennessee, because once you get outside that hub in Oak Ridge or Irwin, Tennessee, or down around Sequoia where people don't do this, and you move to McNairy County or even Shelby County where your dad lives, people are going to start to say, well, I don't want that uranium around me. And so we better get that economy opened up so that we can all participate in the free market economy of a kilowatt. Mm-hmm. And I think we can do that with some work. And I think that we better keep burning coal until we get there.
So specifically within infrastructure, transportation-wise, where do you see the priority of that? I know we're talking about electric kilowatts and hopefully more in the ground to prevent what's happened here of late with the ice and snow. But from a transportation perspective, and I say specifically, for instance, that I'm aware of, here in Montgomery County, we've had the I-24 widening project that has been the 30-year plan that has now been pushed off and pushed off again. We've got a couple of roads that were DOT approved and ready to go, but there's no money for them, so they're just sitting idle. Mm-hmm. So how do you foresee combating some of those things that are vital to infrastructure from a transportation perspective?
I think our priorities have to be maintain what we have first, finish the projects that we've undergone and reassess what those performance measures are and get ourselves back on something acceptable on track. I hear some of the other folks talk about we're going to 4-lane every road here and there. I will not say that, because I think when those folks say it, they're the ones that think the money grows on trees. Mm-hmm. A, we don't have the money for it, and B, you start to get into eminent domain.
Yeah.
So I think, like, bless you, I think if you're going out toward Memphis, there's probably places we could use a 3rd lane. Certainly in my district in Roane and Loudoun County, we need a 3rd or 4th lane in some cases. What's the new malfunction junction going into West Knoxville? It's more than a lane. In many cases, it's another bridge. As you look and see, you'll have lots of people say, well, we just need to add another lane.
Yeah,
well, it's not that simple.
A lot easier than it sounds.
And it's super expensive. So I think that's got to be down the road. Bridges is a huge issue. We've got, just in my district, bridges that have been on, and I don't remember the scoring now, but let's say it's 1 through 5, with 5 being great and 1 being horrible, that are in 2s and 3s. Yeah, and that's an infrastructure problem.
That is a huge problem.
And these are small roads, right? These aren't the interstates, and these aren't even Highway 70s or state highways. These are, in many cases, county roads. We're in trouble on the infrastructure.
And hence you see what happened in eastern Tennessee with the hurricane last year, when you hit bridges that are 1s and 2s and 3s that aren't structurally sound, they go down. So,
well, and some of those bridges that went out in Irwin, Tennessee, when I went up, because I was up there a couple days after that happened.
And I don't want to minimize what actually happened there, so that's certainly not the case.
They
got pummeled.
They were probably 5s, and they got pummeled. Yeah, it was something else.
So much mud and rain and stuff come down on it.
Yeah.
Something weak had to go, and it would have to be them.
So one more time, make sure I answered your question correctly.
But I think as a governor, if you can prioritize, and I like what you said, which was prioritize making sure that what we have
is functional
and in really good shape.
Yep.
That's even more important than adding capacity or doing different things.
Get a hold of the contracts, because I think we have an issue with the contracts. And I got it from the great source who got it from TDOT, that we have a 40-year, and we had lots of 15 and 20-year projects. That's unacceptable. Those are jobs programs. We're not managing those contracts, and we have to do better at that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. It's been an honor to get to be with you here tonight. I appreciate your questions. I hope I answered them. I know I'm kind of wordy about some of those things. Most things that we are concerned about aren't yes and no. We can come to a quick no, I won't routinely do contracts without a bid, right? But then I think you have to understand the why behind that. And so if it sounds a little wordy, that's why I try to do those things. I'm sick of those career DC politicians. Some of them have never been to DC, but they're still career DC politicians. It's like the brother from another mother that you've never met, right? Because they behave like DC politicians. And we're eat up with them here in Tennessee because we've been poorly led. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And I can promise you this, I'll mess some things up as your next governor. I will. But that's up to you then to let me know what those things are. I can promise you this, that we will have a dead-eye focus on liberty and less government. And lots of those things, I hear from time to time, Monty, you've got to put more money in to keep pulling business in here. I don't think so. I think you got to have liberty and less government. And I think that the first businesses that we ought to try to help maintain their viability, if we helped any, would be the ones that are already here. Yes. Isn't that a novel concept? Yeah. And I'm not talking about putting a check in a Lowe's hand or even a small Monty Fritts business or whomever, a small business. I'm just saying set conditions so that businesses can prosper, right? I talk to lots of small business owners where they say things to me like, the state's always got their hand stuck out. And if it's not for money, it's another piece of paper. And we've forgotten in Nashville that we work for the people of Tennessee. So I do plan to recalibrate that, and I appreciate y'all's time tonight.
Thank you.